Hi everyone and welcome to video number 3. Okay, so in the last video we left off where we found out we were pregnant with a DIY, not a DIY, but an at-home pregnancy test. So next step was to, first we told our family and close friends, and we had a very, very positive feedback. Even though it came to as a shock to some of our family members, since we didn't tell anyone we were trying to get pregnant, everybody received it very well and was just as excited, if not more excited, than we were. My mom was definitely like ecstatic about it. She was putting pressure on my own a few years before that already to kind of give her grandbabies. So yeah, very, very excited. And then the next step was to kind of get a test, the blood test done to make sure that we were to get, I don't want to say a second opinion because I used a few pregnancy tests, but to get that confirmation that we definitely were pregnant and that everything was okay. Okay, so we were only living in that specific area for a few months. And even though I had a general practitioner, been to a general practitioner in this province, I didn't have one in the area that we were living in. What I did have, though, was an immense fear of medical practitioners in general. So this stems from a time in my life when I had problems with my stomach. It was about a year and 6 months where I would be in and out of the emergency room, and one of the doctors eventually, the terminology that he used, or what he called it, is he called it an attack. So I'm going to use that term. So what would happen in this attack would be my intestines would go into spasm, and I would actually have to go to the hospital to get a drip for some relief. Where or why this actually turned into me having a fear of medical professionals is because I wasn't validated. A lot of the medical professionals that I did meet during that time thought I was over exaggerating, or that the pain wasn't real. Here I have to mention the hospital that I went to a few times was very close to the university. And I know that some of the university students would actually go in and say they've got a stomach pains or cramps or whatever, so that they can or get out of tests or assignments. So maybe that's why. But it definitely had a different effect like on me, because they didn't take me seriously at all. It was a lot of the time it was just brushed off as being IBS. And I think it was about my third attack where the doctor said, the emergency room doctor said, it's just IBS. And I got frustrated and I said it can't be IBS, because at that stage I was on a very strict diet and I actually knew exactly what I took in. I was like, it's impossible. Like, I know what I took in. There's no way that any of the food that I ate could actually have irritated my bowels. Like, they're not on the list of foods to avoid if you have got IBS. My dad's got IBS, so I know what would irritate him, and I kind of had a little bit of a history or knowledge about it. But it made me feel very insecure about understanding my own body, my own medical knowledge, and just made me feel insecure that maybe this is just all in my head. So I did go and see a psychologist to help me deal with, like, if it was stress related. Eventually, because it was an ongoing thing and you can't go to the emergency room all the time because there's no consistency. You see a different doctor every time. I did try to find a specialist or a doctor that I can have a journey with or walk a path with to get to a solution. Okay, so and I had to go through a few doctors, did a few gastroscopies and colonoscopies, scans, x-rays, whatever. And they could see, eventually, they could identify that there was a reason for my pain. In one instance, they could identify that your in my stomach, where it's supposed to be acid, there was, it seems like some of the alkaline that was in your intestines had gone into, and it was like this exchange of acid and bases or alkalines or whatever. In some of the sonars or x-rays, they could identify inflammation, so at least I had some validation that, okay, you're not crazy, there is pain, and you're not taking a chance, there definitely is pain. But they couldn't tell me the reason for this pain or what to do to prevent it. The last doctor we went to, it also had gastroscopy and colonoscopy with this doctor. It must have cost my parents a lot of money. Luckily, we had a good medical aid as well. But there were a lot of tests done. And the last doctor eventually said, we'll have to wait for another attack. And while this attack is happening, you'll have to go for a CAT scan. And thankfully, by the grace of God alone, I've never had an attack again. When I did develop was a fear for being or feeling judged by medical professionals. So I took that with me. So trying to find a doctor was not as plain and simple as it might seem to most, because I have this fear and I was very scared. Eventually got a general practitioner that is in our area, very close by, like walking distance from the place that we were living at that stage. Made an appointment with her. She was absolutely fantastic. Really, really felt so comfortable with her, and it was wonderful. I haven't felt like that in a very long time, like up until that point. So I was very grateful. And we did a general checkup, and I spoke to her about it. I was like, okay, well, I haven't been to a gynecologist yet. Asked her advice of when do I see a gynecologist? Should I make an appointment? And because I felt so comfortable with her, I also asked her what gynecologist she would recommend. She then told me that she's also only been in the area for a very short time. She also moved from a different province. And I love the fact that she was so honest with me. She mentioned a few names of gynecologists that were in the close by hospital, but she was honest with the fact that she didn't necessarily approve of one above the other. Yeah, so, but she did mention that you can only see a gynecologist a little bit later on. I don't have to stress too much about seeing one right away. So that put my mind at ease as well. What then happened was I was still trying to decide on a gynecologist, and I came to the conclusion that maybe I'm going to have to see more than one to really find the gynecologist that I'm comfortable with. And in the meantime, I made an appointment with a sonographer, so I'm really hoping I got the terminology right, but a medical professional that specializes in doing sonars. And that took place it usually takes place on week 12, because they also check for any developmental issues like indications of Down syndrome or chromosome issues, via the scan, etc. And they sometimes are also able to check for the gender. So I made an appointment, and the weekend before we had to go to our appointment, we were visiting Marnit's mom and dad, and his grandmother's also in the same town, and we visited her as well. And we were in her little room at the old age home, and her whole wall is filled with photos of family members. And this was the first time that I was in her room. So she was telling us about all these people and all these family members, and at one point she came across a photo of triplets, and she was telling us the story about the triplets, and something like stuck to me and was like, okay, but hang on, these triplets, were they conceived, was it spontaneous? Did she go for any IVF or treatments? And they couldn't answer me, and I was like, okay, well, maybe, is there any other history of multiples? And both his mom and his grandma were like, yes. I looked at mine and was like, did you know this? Like, why didn't you tell me this? Like, how do I not know this? And at that point, even though we didn't do any kind of sonar, and obviously I was like scared to say this out loud, but at that point I just knew. I knew I was going to have twins. So yeah, later on we learned that there's both a history of twins on Madnitz's mom and his dad's side. Now we'll be able to get into discussion, and there are different people that feel differently. So when you have twins, the only twins that are genetically predisposed, or that there's any genetic reason for having twins, is if it's two different eggs that are fertilized by two different sperm. Where if it's identical twins or monozygotic twins, it's spontaneous. So there's a very big train of thought, or a lot of people that will tell you that that's not genetic, where there still are a few people that will tell you that those kinds of twins come from the dad's side. So it doesn't, to me, it's either or. It doesn't really matter if it's genetic or not genetic. Like, we were having twins, so it was fine. Okay, but at that point we hadn't seen them yet, so I didn't have that confirmation. It was just my mommy gut feeling telling me we're having twins. That was on the Sunday. The Wednesday we went in, and it was freaking amazing. Like, the doctor that we went to see, she is really, really fantastic on more than one level. She put the equipment on my tummy, and my eyes were still trying to make sense of the black and white spots on the screen, and to me it felt like a split second. She confirmed. She said, well, I can tell you that there are two. And I remember giving like a little bit of a yelp, or I was so shocked that I didn't have air. And I remember feeling insecure because I know my stomach moved, and it was just like one tear dripping down my cheek. And then she grew silent, and she said, but. And then she showed us Samuel's bladder. It was this big black void. And it didn't take a medical degree to realize that something was wrong. She did, however, say that she's having difficulty. She did go to her books, and she said she's got a feeling that it's PUV, which is a posterior utheral valve. but she's having difficulty identifying the gender to confirm this diagnosis. So she's not 100% sure. But it was obvious that something was not 100%. And then she did say that she's got a colleague, a specialist, who's, according to her words were, his bread and butter is twins. That's what he specializes in. And she is going to refer us to him for a second opinion and to find out what's going on. But she's got a very good feeling that this is a PUV. She also mentioned, or she told us what a PUV is and how it works, and why, like in my first video, I mentioned that it's important for the urine that babies release is important because it's amniotic fluid that also helps them when they start developing their lungs. So she did mention the possibility of terminating the pregnancy, and I just knew it was like this calm just dropped over me, and a calm that my mom explains as the Holy Spirit, and which I can only explain as being definitely abnormal, paranormal, or I don't know what you want to call it, but it wasn't from me. It wasn't from me. If we're getting a little bit of that side, but I had this calmness and was like, this is not the end of the story. And the baby was completely healthy, and a lot of the time I think that just reinforced that this was not going, there was no way that I was going to terminate the pregnancy. I was just not going to make such a final decision for somebody else's life. I'm not saying that if you're in a similar position and you decide that it's wrong at all, it's your personal decision, but it was just too much of a final decision for me to make. Luckily, Madness agreed to a large extent. And we also felt that we didn't have all the information yet. We had an opportunity to go and confirm this diagnosis with a specialist. So there were we weren't going to take a decision right away, but she did mention it. And then she also said that should you have 2 babies, it will be a miracle. And as harsh as those words were to hear at that point, it makes me realize just how amazing our journey really is, because it is a miracle. Yeah, so in the next video, I'll talk about our visit with our next doctor, who was the neonatal specialist, just to conclude this and prove how freaking amazing this doctor was and how amazing this was in terms of getting over my fear of doctors. This doctor spent a lot of her time. We were our last appointment for the day, so it was definitely longer than 40 minutes appointment, and she didn't charge us. She said she didn't feel comfortable. I was like, okay, but you're still spending your time. You spent your time, and that's what we're paying for. And she said, don't feel comfortable because I couldn't have given you a diagnosis right off the bat, and I don't feel comfortable taking your money. And I was like floored. I never heard of anything like that happen before in my whole entire life. And this was like, I just kind of knew at that point that something big is at play, or I was grateful for the fact that I had this opportunity with a second doctor to actually work through my fear of being scared of doctors. Yeah, so next video I'll chat about the third doctor, the neonatal specialist, and what happened there. Thanks. Bye.